everyone, we good? Can you hear me? I can hear myself, so it's probably, thanks Russell, that's probably pretty good. Let me rewind, I've got all out of whack here. Welcome to Empathy, the hidden ingredient of good software development. Now, just to sort of caveat, this is very much, welcome, come on in, very much a sort of soft skills focused talk. There's going to be no code particularly. I'm going to be talking about sort of dev, ops, and QA and architecture and things, but yes, no code, no super techie stuff. Most of the talks I've seen at JAX so far have been amazingly techie. This is hopefully a welcome break, okay? Maybe. So empathy, just in terms of understanding where we're all at, kind of getting a base definition of empathy, this is what I like. It's the feeling that you understand and share another's experiences and emotions. Now, the emotions part is critical. As software developers, and I am a software developer, sometimes the emotion part I find is quite hard, yeah? And it's the ability to share someone else's feelings and sort of see from their perspective, yeah? This is kind of my base definition of empathy, where we're going to start from today. So I work as a consultant. When I go into companies, often I'll sort of say to people, what do you think, let me just roll this up. I get called in with lots of tricky things. So OpenCredo is a company I work for. Various different debacles of all different kinds of things. We get called in to help people fix these things. Sometimes conversations go a little bit like this. Because I'm quite tuned into empathy. It's a personal passion of mine. I sort of say to the team, I'm like, I think we're missing some empathy here. Yeah. Often the pushback is that a new JavaScript framework? Yeah. And I'm like, no, it's a JavaScript build tool. No, but no, like shared understanding. Is it a communication style? RX empathy? It's like we're so focused at tech sometimes, yeah? Guilty as charged, totally. But it's about genuinely thinking about the needs and feelings of your customer, your teammate, your boss, or dare I say it, even the internet troll, yeah? Anyone on Twitter will have dealt with a few internet trolls, I'm sure. I love Twitter, I'm on Twitter quite a bit, so I do deal with some funny things. Empathy sometimes I think is misplaced as well. I was going to move the laptop, that'd be dangerous. As a developer, I saw this actually like about a few months ago now, maybe even a year ago. It's a great quote. Yeah, as I read it, I was like, that's brutal. Oh, that's funny. Oh, it's true. Do you know what I mean? Like, is empathy kind of misplaced? Yeah. So we're typically developing software for other people. Unless it's a kind of tool for yourself, it's pretty much for other people. Yeah, it's with other people. Here's the community, JAX community. Typically, you're working in teams in organizations, even in open source. And we're trying to create an emotional experience. And that might sound weird, but what I mean is when I want people to use my software, and if it's really businessy software, I don't want them to hate it. Do you know what I mean? You like them to love it, you like them to feel positive, but at the very least, I don't want people to hate working with my software. And that is an emotional experience, yeah? So surely we have to understand other people's experiences. If we don't, we get this kind of thing, yeah? Bad design. We haven't empathized with the actual situation we're trying to address, yeah? Who's been in a meeting like this? Yeah, well, I'm sure more of you have, yeah, so a few nods, yeah? These kind of things. You've got to think about other people, be they business people, be they fellow techies as well. And then not hating software, my personal bugbear is passwords. Everyone like that? You must have one character, uppercase, lowercase, got to be two symbols, not next to each other. It's just like you clearly haven't thought, about the actual needs of the system. Yes, security is massively important, but so is user experience, yeah? Empathy with the people using your systems. So this, in my mind, is why empathy is important, and that's what we're going to look at over the next 30 or so minutes. This is me, shameless plug. Hit me up on Twitter, @DanielBryant UK. Love to get involved with these kind of things. A couple of jobs at the moment. I work as the chief scientist at OpenCredo, which means I kind of thought leader / loudmouth. I get to go to lots of conferences and talk to very interesting people like yourselves. I'm CTO at Spectre Labs, and we're focusing around building products and solutions for microservice testing. So if you want to come and chat to me afterwards about microservice testing, would love that as well. Over the last sort of 10 years or so, I'm primarily sort of working on driving change through technology and teams. So my background is, I've got like a degree in AI and stuff, but I'm very interested in pop psychology. So I'm not trained formally in psychology, but I love pop psychology. I'll mention a few of the books as we go along through that I recommend if you're interested in learning more about these things as well. So diving into empathy, I'm going to take sort of a three-step approach. We're going to look at core principles. We're going to look in the real world, which I think is most interesting for this audience. And then I'm going to look a bit about leadership, because wherever you are in the organization, whatever you do, you are a leader to some degree. Even if you're just pairing, you're leading that pair to some degree, yeah. Leadership is super important. I got into it sort of 5 or so years ago in my career, and it's been a turning point in productivity, enjoyment. It's really changed my career, dare I say. And it was through the LJC, actually, through the London Java community, they switched me on to these things. Core principles with empathy. So it's know yourself, know others, and seek rapid feedback. Pretty much kind of good programming practices, you could argue as well. Knowing yourself, who you are, determines how you see others. Obviously you look through the world with your own eyes, but your biases, how your day's been even, will determine very much what you see outside in the world. The first person, therefore, you need to examine, without getting too deep, is yourself. You need to understand yourself to some degree. Knowing others is super important. There's only one of me, one of you. The rest of the world is other people. Yeah, it's really hard to understand how other people think sometimes. And something as I've done more leadership positions, I realized this is really powerful. Knowing others, you can lift people up very easily and you can bring them down very easily as well. Got to be very conscious of our actions. Seeking rapid feedback is something, particularly in the sort of social skills, is often hard. It's quite hard getting truthful feedback from people, but it's really beneficial. No one gets this stuff right all the time. The soft stuff is the hard stuff, yeah? Soft skills are really hard. Knowing myself, so for me, the journey to sort of knowing myself a little bit better began at uni. I really got into Buddhism and Tai Chi and stuff. I'm not going to stand up here and say I'm a Buddhist, I'm definitely not, but I like a lot of Buddhist values. So for me, the combination of sort of doing meditation, chatting to very interesting people at retreats and stuff, nothing too much like Steve Jobs, but as in I really enjoyed kind of understanding some of those things. But in combination with reading these 2 books was really powerful for understanding kind of how I work, yeah? We've all got our own idiosyncrasies, haven't we? And like winning with people, the first chapter is you must know yourself before you know others. Emotional Intelligence is quite an old book. It's a classic book. It's where we take the term EQ from. And I reread it recently again. It's an amazing book for helping you understand who you are and therefore how you see others. And you can never eliminate your bias, but you can at least sort of attempt to identify some of your bias, yeah? Knowing others, it's as simple as putting yourself in their perspective, yeah? Walking a mile in their shoes, whoever that may be, yeah? That's the hardest thing to do, but I'll talk about some examples, some more concrete examples of this later, but this is really powerful, actually sort of living the life of someone else, so to speak, in a very bounded context, albeit. Now, empathy, like many things in life, is on a scale. You're not empathic or not, it's a range of things. Strong empathy, bit of a Star Wars geek, yeah? So strong empathy is kind of Yoda. Feels the Force, understands it, yeah, really gets it. Often people think kind of the opposite of this is, let the hate flow through you, that kind of thing. Whereas in reality, I think, so strong apathy, but in reality, I think the danger is actually being apathetic, not really caring at all. Rather than being hate-filled, it's being like, oh, whatever, you just ignore that broken build, or you ignore your colleague's request for help. Do you know what I mean? That's just as damaging sometimes as actually being hateful or spiteful. So it is always a range, and I think all of us have got like natural inclinations, but we can totally nurture certain behaviours as well. It's a thing you can learn. So let's dive in. Many of us, I'm sure, work with requirements gathering. I'm assuming most of the room is software engineers, QA, architects, that kind of thing. Now, we need to make sure we get good requirements because we're creating software for other people, yeah? Now, I had a bit of, actually, it was JAX London last year. I met an awesome person called Jeff Sussner, who's written that book on your right there. Jeff did a one-day workshop at JAX London last year, thoroughly enjoyed the workshop, chatted to Jeff over a beer afterwards, had some great conversation. But he really taught me about thinking of this slight buzzword, but post-agile, yeah? Many of us have worked with agile, or hopefully moving towards agile, depending on what company you work for. But we sort of get the agile principles, but there's this notion now of a kind of post-agile stage, and a lot of it revolves around design thinking, yeah? And design thinking conveniently kind of encompasses these things, which Jeff talks about in the book. Empathy, topic of today. Ethnography is getting out and sort of living in the people you're observing, living in their environment, that kind of thing. Getting out of the building, as the lean startup people say. Abductive thinking is kind of coming up with an inference and working your way back, sort of hypothesis testing, that kind of thing. And iterative user testing, hopefully, is kind of a no-brainer to most of us in the room. So it's that slow iteration, or not slow, I should say, ideally fast, but small chunks of iteration rather than doing kind of big bang stuff. Now this for me is a really powerful idea for approaching the design of software. Empathizing with users, getting in their environment, coming up with hypotheses and testing them. Good stuff. You need to start with why. Now this is often missed in my experience as a consultant in many businesses. Why are we even building this thing? Many times as an engineer, I was given a task and I didn't know why I was doing it to some degree. I knew why I was doing it, but I didn't know the bigger picture. And it was really hard to empathize with the end user goals in that case. I'm a big fan of impact mapping. I'm not sure if people sort of generally heard of impact mapping. Yeah, I see a few. Awesome tool. Goiko wrote a great book. You can grab the book online. It's not my work, like I say. It's a great book. You start with why. People have Simon Sinek stuff. Start with why, that kind of thing as well. He's got a great TED Talk video. And then once you've kind of got the, why are we doing this thing? Like almost before we even think about software, why are we doing this thing as a business, as an organization, as an individual? Like, what's our why? Then, who is involved? Who can affect this why? How? And the what. Yeah, so you start with why and go back. This is a great reference. I highly recommend it. Now, in order to understand the who, because the who is critical, in people are using the software, things like personas are really useful. As a developer, I was exposed to this actually through a UX specialist friend of mine. And once I dialed into this, defining sort of personas of who is going to use my application, it really helped me understand how to build the software. Yeah? If you're building software I have built software, for example, for the target audience was 50-year-old ladies. And then I built software for 20-year-old males. Totally different UX, yeah? But I didn't fully appreciate that. When I developed the software actually for the 50-year-old lady group, we were mobile phone stuff, we were doing it with like really small buttons. That category of user at the time was not typically tech savvy. We'd forgotten all that stuff, and it was a real kind of punch in the mouth, and we suddenly realized we'd completely not empathize with our target user base. So doing these kind of personas is really valuable for identifying who your users are going to be. Expressing sort of needs and expectations, you uncover like universal features, which is really useful, and you kind of think a bit more about their backgrounds, their goals and their values. Now, the best way to do this is to go in the field. There's whole speciality kind of topics and domains for doing this kind of thing, but it's quite expensive. So as a kind of cheaper alternative is something called empathy mapping. Comes from this fantastic book on the right, Game Storming. It's like a book full of innovation games. Fantastic book. And I've done this recently at the conference in Agile on the Beach conference in Cornwall. You have like basically you put your person you're building the software for in the middle there. You draw it on like a nice A3 bit of paper, and you write down what are they hearing, what are they thinking, what are they seeing, saying, doing, that kind of thing. And you basically, your team goes away, writes loads of stuff on Post-it notes, and comes back and stick them on. Then you kind of group them together, then you have a discussion, and it's a cheaper form, much more fast and not effective, but much faster version of doing full persona creation. Fantastic little tool for empathizing who we're building software for. Get out of the building is super important, ethnography. And I'm going to shout out Not on the High Street. I did some consultancy for them a couple of years ago now. And they are a marketplace. So they have basically kind of like an eBay type thing. People put stuff online. Customers come along and buy stuff. It's like a two-sided marketplace with partners and with customers. Now, when you join the Not on the High Street tech team, it's super easy to empathize with customers, because many of us were customers. And if you're looking for something for your partner or whatever, this is a fantastic place to buy cool stuff, bespoke kind of gifts. But many of us were customers, so we could very much empathize with the customer experience. But we couldn't empathize with the partner experience, the people who were selling stuff. So they basically created this whole cool thing. This is how cool Noths are. They spent like lots of effort doing this, and they sent us out to work with partners. And it was fantastic. You got to go into like warehouses. Like Not on High Street has people from like 1 or 2 people to massive enterprises, yeah? And working in their warehouses in Christmas, in Easter, and different times of the year, basically gave us all a new appreciation for how the partners are going to be using our software. So identify, and it actually changed how we develop the software. So very much identify the weak links in your kind of empathy value chain. As a customer, very easy to identify with. As a partner, many of us couldn't identify. So by getting out of the building, seeing where the users are actually using your stuff, I learned some it was a proper humbling experience. I learned some really cool stuff. So, wrapping up core themes and requirements, knowing yourself, what impact am I seeking? Kind of start with why. That then leads to the who, and you can empathize to seek to understand others, visit users in the natural habitat, and ultimately prototype, build, measure, learn, all that good stuff, seeking rapid feedback. Really valuable stuff. So that kind of wraps up requirements. Now on to architecture and development. A quick time check of how we're doing. That's good. Excellent. So yeah, we're building software alongside other people, the vast majority of us at least. Architecture is super important. My sort of three key things I've taken actually from Simon Brown, who's at the conference. I think he's coming along tomorrow. Definitely worth seeing Simon's talk. But I've taken my cues from Simon, and he talks about architecture currently, in the modern age, being about shared understanding, just enough upfront design, and risk management. Yeah, and that for me, that's what I really like that. I've seen it in the field for many years for me to kind of say, yes, that's what I view architecture as now. But empathy plays a point nearly in all of these things. Architects must code, Simon says, and I totally buy into that. I have done some architecture stuff in the past where I didn't code as much, and it was really hard to empathise with the people in the trenches doing the work. And I learned my lesson, now I try as much as I can to keep hands-on. Just enough upfront design, like the power of diagramming. This book, Barry Cranford recommended this book to me, about using diagramming techniques to basically share ideas and build sort of a communication, build collaboration around the ideas and bringing people along on the journey so you can empathise with what they're up to is super powerful in terms of doing just enough upfront design. A lot of people say, that a bit popular in the agile space at the moment is, I've lost my train of thought there. I'll have to leave that one. There's some things that are very popular in terms of leaving the decision to the last minute. And sometimes that decision, the last responsible moment is what I was thinking of. A lot of talking about the last responsible moment, very powerful kind of idea. But sometimes the last responsible moment is actually upfront. Yeah, in terms of security, in terms of a lot of non-functional requirements, upfront is where you need to do the thinking. So the power of diagramming kind of helps you, in combination with architecture, helps you flush these things out. Risk management, you have to empathise with, the technical kind of goals and also the stakeholder goals as well. You have to be able to empathise. Often when I was a more junior techie, managers would ask me stuff, and some of them just asked for, for the sake of it, I guess. But other ones, I couldn't understand why they were asking me things. And as I moved more into that role, I could empathise more with their demands, their requirements. So actually, when you're more junior, trying to seek to understand what the managers really want, why are you asking me that? What's your goal? Often helps you answer the question in a lot more effective way. So I think I've got a bit more about actually risk management. So evaluation is a super critical skill, like in terms of technology, architecture. As a consultant, I do not see enough evaluation in the field, if I'm honest. I want to share with you a nice little quote, which I like a lot. And it says, "I'll postpone using this shiny new framework until my peers have validated the proposed benefits with rigorous scientific experiments." And this was, of course, said by no programmer ever. Yeah? We just don't do it, do we? We're attracted, most of us, to the shiny. I'm generalising, of course. But many times I've walked in and I say, why are you using Rails? Why are you using Spring Boot? And it's like, it was like that when I got here, or we thought it was the best thing, or that kind of thing, but without any kind of deep thinking, deep empathy in terms of what the maintainability issues are going to be like, maintenance issues. I love fitness functions. So there's a great book coming out by Neil Ford and Rebecca Parsons. They're talking about microservices as evolutionary architecture, trying to get a bit more structure to kind of... A lot of the microservice stuff, when you peel it back, is really about good architecture, enforcing good architectural principles, coupling, cohesion, that kind of thing. Now, they're doing this great book, and something I've taken from the book is this notion of fitness functions. So if you're saying you're looking to bring in a new NoSQL data store into your tech stack, you've probably got a series of criteria you can identify. Apologies if it's a bit small, but there's like usability, auditability, maintainability, high throughput, data security. What you can do is you, as a team, come up with your axes and then give yourself half the number of total points available and draw your idealized fitness function. Yeah? So, then the beauty of this is you can go to the market and do assessments on other tools like Cassandra, Mongo, Neo, and draw the fitness function of those tools and try and get a match for what you think you need and what the current awareness is in the market, what the current offerings are in the market. Awesome for evaluation, gets rid of a whole bunch of dogmatic arguments, but the cool thing as a consultant is it gives a record. Because at the time, we valued this as a fitness function. We believed a NoSQL solution with these characteristics was the best thing. Yeah, because more often than not, when I go, it's very easy as a consultant to be judgmental. Oh, why'd you choose that? Why'd you choose that? But with this kind of stuff, gets rid of some of that. They were like, at the time I made this choice, I was optimizing for developer productivity. We had no money. I had to get like money in the door. And I was like, that's a smart choice. Given that context, it's a smart choice. I can empathize with the person easier. Fitness functions, super useful. Matt Raible's comparison matrix, slightly more old school approach. You can kind of, this is from a blog post of his many years ago, comparing J2E frameworks across the top, and then he has criteria down here. And you give all these sheets to your team individually, you go away, do some time-bounded research, and you can score things, you can do weights if you want on what you value most, and then you all come back together again, and you make a choice on the framework based on the kind of the shared collaboration and the shared research, these kind of things. Awesome for, for evaluation, but more importantly, again, it's documentation. Like as a consultant, if I rock up and I see these kind of things, I'm like, brilliant. So I understand why you've chosen Rails. I understand why you've chosen Hadoop there or whatever. It's really good to help me get a baseline start and go on. The spine model was really valuable. Again, not my work. I saw this at a conference a couple of years ago. And it basically says effective conversations make for effective collaboration. Yeah, and we're all collaborating, building software. As a species, we're very much driven by tools. The reason humans are successful, arguably, opposable thumbs, tooling, all that kind of good stuff. But the problem is with tooling, in the modern age, we get stuck in a dilemma where equally plausible options are available and we get dogmatic. Yeah? I like Java, you like Go. And it's like, you can have crazy arguments all day for these things. What might be more important is to step up the spine. Yeah? So if we're saying Java versus Golang, like we step up practices, but what do we value as a practice? What do we value as principles, values? We might say that in this moment in time, I really value a strong tool chain, and therefore Java might be the best choice here. I really value small, statically compiled binaries. Golang probably the best choice. But we're moving up the spine and having the correct conversations rather than Java's best, Go's best, JavaScript's best, that kind of thing. It's really important. And I've put some stuff there. I'll share these slides online on my SlideShare, a bit more description of how to use these kind of things. But this I found is a really valuable model for lifting people up when they get a bit stuck on the X versus Y type thing. So coding, all code is communication, yeah? Hopefully many of you think that. I like to live by this one, always code as if the person who ends up maintaining your code is a violent psychopath who knows where he lives. It's Jeff Atwood. Jeff's an awesome, check out his blog, Coding Horror. But clean code, I'm sure many of you in the room are into clean code. Uncle Bob, or Sandro, of course. Sandro's good work, Sandro Mancuso. I believe he's speaking here today as well. This is really good stuff. Communication via wikis and readmes is really important for sharing knowledge as well. Systems thinking, I think, is really critical for me. Understanding the user journey for what you're building really helps you empathize and understand the requirements at a bigger level. I think traditionally IT was people sort of segmented tasks or chunked up tasks and just gave them to people. And without the wider context, it's sometimes hard to make the correct choice when you're coding in the trenches, yeah? So things like user stories and drilling down into acceptance criteria. At Open Credo, we often now build BDD-style tests as we develop applications. It helps us eliminate kind of drift from client requirements and so forth, but it also helps us by actually writing out, having the three amigos discussion, like a tester, a stakeholder, and a developer in the same, at least those three in the conversation. And then it really helps drive out a lot of uncertainty in the product design. And then if you can automate that in, say, Cucumber or JBehave, even better. You've got automated regression tests then, super powerful. But so many times it's helped me take a bit of a step back when I'm building these scripts and having these conversations to, I understand why we're building that thing. Oh, do you realize we could not even build that thing and change this configuration option and still meet the need? And the client's like, oh my God, yes, we could do that. But until we've had those conversations, you can't do it. It's really, really quite hard. And I'm really a big fan of in terms of systems thinking, looking at the bigger picture, BDD and TDD, the outside-in thing, I think, is really helpful. Just going in from what is the need and drilling in. When I started my career, I used to get a lot of build this, build that, and I was working from inside out. And I kind of gradually put more and more layers on the onion. And then only when I got to the end that I realized what I was building, and I was like, oh. So it's all related here in terms of think outside in. What is basically the why, drive into the what. Shameless plug, if you're building microservices, I've kind of tried to relate some of the stuff I'm talking about today in a blog post I did for Specto recently about thinking around building microservices. You're building a system, yeah? So microservices, it's not, in my mind, it's good architectural principles. There is more things now involved. There used to be one monolith, now there's many things and all that. But thinking at the systems level, what does the actual system do? And then building tests around that, and then kind of drilling in, to the individual service, to the composition of the services, so the layers in the services. I've hopefully, chatting to interesting people at conferences, tried to dump lots of references, lots of thinking there. So please do check that link out later. So wrapping up the architecture and dev, knowing yourself, checking your evaluation and communication skills, really powerful. Yeah. Knowing others in terms of understanding the whole, being sort of systems and solutions focused, I found really beneficial. Yeah. And establish kind of the correct perspective. I think outside in, starting with the why, is really valuable. Seek rapid feedback once again. Yeah. Prototype stuff, try it out. If it doesn't work, adapt. Really, really good stuff. So operations. So the next part of the talk is about ops, sysadmin, that kind of thing, because everyone is ultimately responsible for the continual delivery of valuable software. Agile Manifesto, principles there, continual delivery of valuable software is really important to your business, to your end user. So there's something called regulatory fit theory, which basically very broadly cuts sort of the world in two, in that some people are prevention-focused and some are promotion-focused. Now, in development, we tend to be more promotion-focused. We tend to want to do cool stuff, push it out there, see what happens. People who work in ops and QA tend to be more prevention-focused. And that's ultimately what they're incentivized for. And in a lot of organizations I work with, the default answer to ops and security is no, because they're paid, their bonus is based on how many outages they have. So clearly they're going to behave that way. But you need to recognize this in terms of understanding when you're working like DevOps transformation, or even just when you're working with operations people. As a developer, try and flip the mindset. Why is that person saying no? Oh, it's because they fear I'm going to break some of their stuff, yeah? And that simple little switch can really help. I'm doing a lot of work at the moment around security and stuff, and I'm really enjoying that. And security is a real, Marmite topic. You love it or you hate it. So, some very traditional companies are very much like, when stuff goes wrong, we put another layer of bureaucracy on top, and that just makes it worse. And it's, you really got to empathise. Why are all these kind of things in place? And then once you empathise, you can sometimes reduce those levels of bureaucracy, for example. Sharing the pain is super critical. So there's an element of safety culture. And I see this in coding as well. So when you code something and you effectively throw it over the wall, so as a developer, you code something, you throw it over the wall to ops, you don't have to worry anymore. Ops get paged, at 3 in the morning if it goes wrong. So you're like, you come in towards perhaps a Friday night, and you're like, oh, I could put in a circuit breaker there. It'll be fine. Chuck it over the wall. Poor ops person gets paged at 3 in the morning on a Saturday. Not cool. And the safety cultures can be explained, slightly weird analogy, with car airbags. Now, car airbags are awesome, yeah, in terms of they have saved countless millions of lives and so forth. But there's an element of when people are surrounded by safety features, they drive more recklessly. Yeah, I think this has been proven in the US. There's an element of, if I have a smash, the airbag will deploy, I'll be safe. So what some people have proposed is kind of removing some of this safety culture and putting a spike in the dashboard instead. Yeah. And the element there, if you're tailing someone down the motorway and you're going to hit the brakes, you're going to think twice if you've got a big spike staring at you in the dashboard. Yeah. And this, for me, is the notion of dev on call. Yeah, I really think, as a developer, you should be responsible for your code. Yeah, and these days, I think I've seen a few talks this morning already saying the same thing. Code isn't done until it's running in production in a reliable way. Ultimately, people like Adrian Cockcroft, from Netflix fame, say code, the code isn't done until it's actually been removed from production. Yeah, so you're still responsible when it's actually running, which to me makes complete sense. When I've thought about it. I've worked in many organizations where they don't do dev on call. When I try and sell in dev on call to organizations, it often meets with a frosty response, I'll be honest. But this kind of, you build it, you run it. We're seeing books pop up, the Google SRE book on O'Reilly, the Keith Morris's Infrastructure as Code. You look at, there's an awesome book coming out by Susan Fowler of Uber, and they all, I know Uber, Google and stuff are a bit different than us typically, but they're all about shared accountability, shared responsibility. So I kind of look to those unicorns as perhaps there's something I can learn from there. A lot of them, they own the code, they get paged in the morning. I think as a community, we developers probably need to change our mindset. A lot of people I chat to, when I talk about dev on call, they're like, I didn't sign up for that. I signed up to be a developer. If I wanted to do on call, I'd be an ops. I was like, yeah, I'm starting to think that's not cool, to be honest. Just a perspective on my angle. DevOps is super important. It's a bit of an overloaded term, a little bit like microservices, dare I say it. We're all doing DevOps, aren't we? We're all doing microservices. Pairing with developers, pairing ops people with developers, I found really beneficial. As a developer, 5 years ago, I paired with an ops person, and I learned like crazy amounts about Linux, which is really cool. Treating operators as stakeholders is really critical as well. Many times I work in teams, and I'm looking around, and I see business people, I see devs, I see QA, no one from ops in the stand-up. I'm like, clearly they're going to get annoyed because they're not represented. We've not invited them. Bring ops into the stand-up. It may take a few kind of days to get everyone comfortable, but it's really valued. They are critical stakeholders. They're going to be shepherding the software when it's in production. Bring them into the stand-up. Bring them into the planning process. Shifting left, as you might have seen me say earlier on, shifting like the QA people and the ops people left adds a lot of value to the design of software, in my experience. So outside in and systems thinking, let me just quickly do a time check on how I'm getting on there. So this is something I learned at QCon New York, I think it was. It's a great talk by Colton Andrus of Netflix fame and Peter. He's an academic. And from an operations standpoint, often what a lot of ops teams do is they look at their system, their network map, and they try and isolate areas they think have got known vulnerabilities. Oh, there's a firewall there, single database here, these kind of things. It's very much inside-out thinking again, and also not systems thinking. So it's like, we know a database is critical, we know a firewall is critical. Well, what Peter and the Netflix team now do is they've got this thing called lineage-driven fault injection. Bit of a mouthful, bit of academic. The paper is actually well worth a read if you're into it's not too techy, if you're into academic papers. But what they actually did is they traced through the system. Imagine the Netflix stack. It's all microservicey, it's all like lots of stuff going on, crazy call graphs. And they actually said when something goes right, basically what could have gone wrong along that path to cause a critical failure. So rather than kind of going inside out, they actually go, right, we've got this thing that worked. Now what could have gone wrong? And they've done some cool stuff you can actually build up, like using SAT solvers, this kind of stuff. You can actually do some mathematics around identifying areas. And Netflix have done this, and they found, I think it was like 90 bugs or something in their code, 90 potential areas of critical failure over the Netflix estate. Maybe that was a bit of a high number, whatever. But anyway, they found a very interesting bunch of bugs they would have never otherwise found because they typically approached the fault tolerances inside out with obviously circuit breakers and things. So that was very interesting, from sort of proving, in my mind, a bit of confirmation bias, but proving the systems thinking thing was pretty cool. Semantic monitoring is really interesting. I saw this at Ticketmaster. So I've done a few microservice migrations, and what we often find is ops people get overwhelmed when stuff goes wrong. Back in the day, it was like MySQL, maybe a WebSphere middle tier or something, and a JavaScript front end. Like when one of those things fails, Nagios kicks in, everyone starts panicking, and you go and fix stuff. When you're in the cloud with microservices, everything's replicated across availability zones, across regions. You might have multi-master things. So all of a sudden, when something goes wrong, like not on the high street, we built a Mesos-based system. And it's been deployed for a couple of years now, and now sometimes they lose whole availability zones. They lose instances all the time. It's no big deal. Don't even alert it anymore. It comes up on the monitoring graph. Oh, instance 157's disappeared. Oh, US North, US East is down or whatever. The way they've coded it is basically, they've coded it around semantic monitoring. So people only get alerted when there is a critical failure, when there is business impact. So MySQL failing, like one of the MySQL slaves failing, no big deal. One of the Mesos clusters failing, no big deal. There's another one. They've got this kind of continual thing going on. It's like, is the user actually affected? And then there's various levels of that. It's like user, the critical thing for not on the high street basically is, can you search, can you add products to your basket, and can you check out? If you can't do that at any given time, you're losing money. Yeah, same with any e-commerce site. But maybe the recommendation system's broken. No big deal, yeah? We just, we alert it, the engineer goes and fixes it or whatever. But this kind of mindset shift of empathizing with what causes the user pain, what causes the business to lose money, rather than alerting on every little thing, you just get it just becomes at you so much if you're working in a cloud environment, you start having to turn things off. But semantic monitoring if the user is affected, the user journey is affected, is really powerful, yeah? So a couple of tips I want to kind of share there in terms of the overall operations kind of vibe with empathy. Wrapping up on that one, it's knowing yourself is seeking freedom and accountability. You want freedom, choosing your tech stack, bringing in Docker, bringing in microservices. You've got to be accountable for that choice. You can't just throw Docker over the wall to the ops people. It's not cool. That kind of thing, yeah? Knowing others, dev on call, DevOps thing, kind of similar thing. I personally have really, I don't want to sound too preachy, but I've really gotten into these things. I love freedom, but I realized I've got to be accountable, yeah, And thinking sort of in terms of systems and outside in has really helped me understand the bigger picture and the values that I should put onto my system based on how it's going to be used. Again, seeking rapid feedback. Semantic monitoring, super valuable tool. I heard actually a great talk, the one before lunch around Docker and so forth. And they were talking very much around this kind of thing, sort of seeking rapid feedback, semantic monitoring. Perhaps I'll share that in the slides as well. That was another really good talk. So, wrapping up now, how are we doing for time? So leadership is critical. We're always influencing people. We're always leading people to some degree, wherever you are in the organisation. So first thing I like to do, the roles I kind of do that these days, often working sort of as a bridge between technical people and the leadership in a company. And more often than not, there's a massive, there's a divide. I wouldn't say massive. There's a divide between tech and leadership. You have to communicate the vision. And this is a technique I borrowed from HBR, which I really like. We often work with teams to kind of come up with what are the strategic goals in the company. And then we map them back to architectural principles and map them back then to design and delivery practices. Now, this is a real one with slight modifications to hide the guilty and the innocent. But this, for me, like once we've done this, like this business, for example, wanted a global platform, English-speaking markets were primary target, reduced the cost and accidental complexity. And then we kind of mapped it back. What are our architectural principles? We need to retire some of the old code. We need to seek high cohesion and low coupling, these kind of things. And then what are the practices in the trenches? For example, we chose the time to use Java, JavaScript, Golang per microservice or whatever. We wanted to introduce some asynchronous communication. But not only did that help me as a developer make sort of daily choices of what the actual architecture should support and what ultimately the business should support, but it gave us a kind of shared understanding that I could happily go and chat to the CEO and we'd be talking on the same kind of terms. Where many companies I've worked, chatting to the CEO, and they're like, well, we're trying to improve the top line, improve the bottom line, these kind of things. And it's a weird conversation. Neither of us get much out of it. Whereas when we've got this in front of us, we can have that communication. I can explain to him or her, if they're interested, how these things impact these things. And it's much easier to justify spending money on them, things like that. But having this shared vision, if you're like a CTO or you're a tech leader, spending a bit of time doing this up front is really valuable. Many companies do it. Zalando are really amazing at this kind of stuff. They've shared a lot of stuff. They've created this thing called radical agility. They've shared a lot of it online. You can have a look about how they've shared their tech vision amongst the company. This is Yelp. So Yelp, whenever you want to build a new service, a new microservice, you have to look at the service principles document. And it basically gives you a checklist for should I build the service. And it basically communicates the values that the company want to share in terms of we're not looking to have like 1 million microservices. We recognize value in coupling and cohesion. And it's a really nice way to share the vision and give you a bit of a checklist for what you're building as well. Halfa, kind of similar with the API guidelines. There's many people do API guidelines. We've been working a bit with Halfa. There's some really cool stuff around sharing the tech vision of a service-driven company. Everything should be exposed as an API. We value these things as a company. We've got together, we've decided these are the values. So communicating the tech vision, really important. And don't micromanage, People do learn from their mistakes. Even when you've communicated the vision, you're still going to be tripping yourself up. And, this has been me many times, It's like, Docker, boof, boof, this kind of thing. But particularly as a leader, it's one of the hardest things. Like, so many times in a company, I'll be working with people and I can see them about to make a mistake. And if it's like a business critical mistake, I would obviously say. But more often than not, I fight myself and I step back because they're going to learn much more by making their own mistakes. I've learned the most by I've learned the most by making my own mistakes. This kind of thing is a bit of empathy again. Don't micromanage. You'll really build up people if you let them with some guidance, make their own mistakes. Listen to empathise and provide feedback. And this is a fantastic book for understanding how to receive and how to give feedback. I read this last year, and it was just a mind-blowing situation. I was having an issue at the time with some tricky clients, should I say. And this was it helped me understand where they were coming from and it helped communicate what I wanted to with them, which is fun. And we both got something out of it, so it was awesome. But there's things like separating appreciation, coaching, and evaluation is a really critical skill. Before I read this book, I used to, and I still do sometimes, but I used to very much mix the two. Thanks for the work, I recommend you do this. Whereas really, it's nice if you can separate in leadership, separate those three things. Thank someone, that's it. If they need coaching, give coaching. an evaluation. It's very easy to mix them up, but the book goes into why it's not beneficial to do that. Simple technique, really valuable. It talks about things like seeking to understand, seeing your blind spots, maybe you're a perfectionist and someone on your team isn't, that kind of thing, got to work with them on that. Identify the relationship system is in terms of what's the relationship, what's the dynamics between perhaps you and another person, you and the team, this kind of thing. And cultivating a growth identity, as they call it, is, a lot of people talk about building companies that kind of grow, that are learning organizations is a popular thing. So this book is a really good book for understanding how to give and receive feedback, basically. So wrapping up, pretty much coming to the end now, leadership is knowing yourself. And I've done things like the Big 5 personality traits and Myers-Briggs. A few of you might do Myers-Briggs. That helped me it's a very broad category, but it helped me understand what kind of tendencies I have as an individual, that kind of thing. Meditation and mindfulness, I think, are really powerful, excuse me, in terms of understanding how you think, how you work. I found with meditation, I can now catch some of the thoughts before I say stuff, which is quite good. Before I used to perhaps speak too quickly. Excuse me. Knowing your vision as a company, as an individual, your mission, your goals, people don't take enough time, is my sort of suspicion in organizations. I've only seen a subset of organizations, obviously, over the years I've worked, but many have not clearly communicated their vision, their mission, and their goals. And it's hard when you're in the front lines to empathize with what the company's actually trying to do sometimes. Knowing others, engineers, we can be a funny bunch, myself included, at times, yeah. You have to, if you're a QA person or you're an architect, you really have to ideally code, understand what developers are going through, these kind of things. Care about the team, their journeys, their stories, their motivations, these kind of things. Spend a bit of time. Some consultancy gigs I've worked on, I've literally hung around the water cooler all day just to learn about the team. I've been brought in, it's a technical issue nominally, and I can often get a feel this is not a technical issue, it's a organizational issue, and I'll just hang around and chat to people, and then you find systemic issues in the organization that you can then work to fix. But caring about people, taking them out for a coffee, buying some beers, whatever works for you, is really valuable. And coaching as well, the feedback book mentions this, but coaching is a really valuable skill. Not giving people all the answers, not telling them when they're going to go wrong. Coaching is really hard, but you have to ask questions, prompt people, let them make their own mistakes. It's really valuable for building up strong leaders in your organization. And again, like I said at the start, tricky, but ask people for feedback. Things like 360 feedback, you get people all around the organization to give you feedback. Probably anonymously, your managers to give you feedback, your peers to give you feedback, and people that you manage to give you feedback. Some of it's brutal, but it's freaking amazing, in terms of if you're genuinely committed to making yourself a better leader, that is the way to do it. And have some honest conversations afterwards as well. So wrapping up, I think that's pretty much, time is pretty good as well. So empathy, what I would say, empathy is like a muscle. You have to work it, yeah? It's like going to the gym, going for a run. I love running, that kind of stuff. Your muscles soon atrophy. Same with empathy. You have to constantly make the effort, I think, to empathize with people, to help other people build empathy, these kind of things. This book is an awesome book. Bumped into it. I did this talk once already at CraftConf, and then someone recommended this book afterwards. It's a fantastic book. This actually gives practical advice on how to kind of work the empathic muscle. It's things like cultivate curiosity about strangers. If you go to meetups, just chat to random people. I've learned a bunch of stuff by doing that. Challenge prejudices. I won't say too much about diversity because I'm like a middle-class white male and I'm not the right person to say it, but diversity is super important. I was very lucky at uni, literally it's 50-50 split of girls and guys on the course, and I've worked in, I did some post-grad stuff, and it was like 5% English people, 95% foreign people, and I just learned so many cool things by different, people think differently, approach problems in a different way. I've learned diversity can really add a lot to you as an individual and add a lot to a company as well. Again, very interesting topic. Trying another person's life is challenging. Maybe you can do it in your company, for example. Listening hard, listening well, opening up to people, and so on. I won't go through all these things, but this is a short little book, great book. If you want to work on empathy, it's not a techie book by any means, but it's a thought-provoking book, in terms of the benefits of empathy. Final thoughts then. So kind of reflecting who we are and how we see ourselves makes a massive impact on how we see others. So really, think about who you are. That's quite deep, but I really benefited. Many of my colleagues, many of my friends have done the same thing. Once you understand yourself a bit better, understand your motivations, it's often easier to empathize with other people. Final thoughts then. So, wrap up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time is pretty good as well. So, wrapping up, I think that's pretty much time Knowing others, is critical, particularly in developing software. You've got to empathise with your customers, with your teammates, these kind of things. Like, I've seen companies where it works, and companies that I'm not necessarily involved with. Etsy springs to mind. Etsy are really cool. Not on High Street, the same kind of thing. They've just got it right. They really think about their customers. They really work hard to build a culture of inclusiveness in the company. So dev, QA, ops, all kind of the same. And it's a fun place to work. Not on High Street, it's probably one of the most fun places I've ever worked in terms of they just made the effort. They had dedicated people, like HR people, trying to break down barriers and make sure we're thinking about the customers all the time. And I know Etsy do the same kind of thing. So yeah, like this kind of stuff is really valuable because you can lift people up in terms of users and your colleagues, or you can bring them down, often without realizing. I think lifting them up is, let's do some good in the world, yeah? Kind of cool. And seeking rapid feedback is really important. You simply can't get it right all the time. It's a learning process. Like literally, I want them to bury me when I've stopped learning. Pretty much, I never want to stop learning. And learning about tech is super important. I would say, individual tech's interesting. Next level up is patterns and architecture. Next level up is like sort of social kind of things. Empathy, psychology, these kind of things. The more I've learned about psychology, the more it's helped me become a better developer. I think anyway, and I've had more fun probably. Yeah, the rest, as they say, is up to you. Thank you very much for your time.